coming up today. We have big news about the California drought, or is it anymore? We'll have another news piece about a huge release of rhinos, maybe coming to a town near you. Find out later. And then our last piece of news, we'll be talking about a gigantic lithium mine. So big, it's the biggest, I think it's the biggest in the world. But why haven't we heard about it? Well, there's probably some reasons. And then we'll be talking about beavers. Our research, our thing of the week is all beaver themed. This is Eco Show. Hello and welcome to Eco Show. I'm Henry. I'm a PhD student in ecology, and I'm doing this show. This is a show about ecology, the environment, sometimes other things, but usually pretty related to that sort of stuff. Generally, I go through I'm switching it up now. So this is the new flow of the show. We're going to try it out. We start off with the headlines, with the news of the week in things related to ecology and the environment. And then we get into our thing of the week, which is there'll be a theme for the week, and we'll have some research related to that and some general information about that thing. So starting off, and before we get into the show this week, I just have to acknowledge that the disasters that happened in Morocco and Libya are just horrible, and that's all ongoing and is really, really sad to see. So I don't have anything particular to say about that, but I'll be looking for some links for where donations can go. I know there's a tricky political situation where some of the countries are saying we don't need help, but I think the Red Crescent, which is like the Red Cross, is out there doing some things. So I'll look up some links and put those below. If you've got $1 or a dime to donate, people really have lost everything out there. But yeah, if you're new to the show, generally the show is kind of not particularly, it's not ignoring negative things, but there's so many positive environmental things in the world that I'll try to usually focus on interesting things that are happening that you won't have seen in the news. You know, usually you'll see an environmental article once or twice a week in your news source of choice, but this tends to be usually it's an environmental disaster or general issues about climate change. Not to say that those aren't real issues, but if you're going to look at the dirty dishes, you got to enjoy a little cake too, you know? I don't know if that analogy works. Anyways, let's hop into the news. So starting off our news this week, the California drought. California, like many Mediterranean climate places in the world, has been experiencing pretty rough drought for the last couple of years. But this has been ended by rain, which has replenished the water supplies. There have been a number of storms moving through California, which have ended the drought. And let's see, what else have we got? Also, the good thing is that around the world, well, this isn't the good thing, but around the world this past summer has been crazy hot. Europe's been insane, but actually average temperatures, even though there are some hot times in California, average temperatures have actually been pretty under control. So it didn't get too stinking hot, and it's expected that the fire season there should be dampened and the drought will be pushed back. It's likely that when the drought does come back, it'll be not a great time, but at least for the time being, it is nice and encouraging to see that hopefully there's a muted fire season in California. They could use a little bit of a break. So some good news for California with the drought. Hopefully no big fires. With my luck, next week I'll be reporting on the biggest California fire ever. But for now, it's looking like California are in the clear. Okay, our next news headline this week: about 2,000 rhinos, I believe these are white rhinos, are going to be reintroduced to the wild in mysterious areas. So what has happened is that the biggest NGO and the biggest wildlife NGO in Africa is called African Parks, and they manage 22 protected areas over 12 countries, and they bought these 2,000 rhinos. And you may be thinking, 2,000 rhinos? Where does someone go about buying 2,000 rhinos? You might be interested in buying 2,000 rhinos. Unfortunately, the deal is done, and there's probably not going to be 2,000 more rhinos for you to buy. But the reason that there were these 2,000 rhinos is that there was a dude who was breeding rhinos, and the motivation behind breeding these rhinos is that he would breed them and then flood the market with rhino horns. So the idea was to basically dampen or hinder poaching by raising a bunch of rhinos and then introducing a bunch of rhino horns to the market. But the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species wouldn't let him do this. I don't know the specifics of why they didn't, but basically it seems like they didn't make an exception for him with this idea. So, bit of a controversial guy, I guess, but sounds like a cool idea. And apparently, it's legal to raise and breed rhinos, which is pretty wild. So, anywho, 2,000 rhinos, and they are going to be introduced into parks, and they've been raised in an environment where they are apparently they're like semi-wild. So they've been in enough open area that people are expecting that they should be able to transition well into the environment. I don't know if they've had their horns cut off yet, but it is going to be secret where they're being put out, so they may not have had their horns cut off in order to keep that. And our big news piece for today is that there was a large lithium discovery in Nevada in the U.S. This is in the McDermott caldera in Nevada. This caldera was formed, so caldera, I believe, is like a big sort of, comes about after a volcanic eruption. And there's all this lithium-rich clay in this ancient volcano. This is estimated to have 40 million tons of lithium, which is just a number, but it's a number which is 13 million more tons than every other lithium producing mine on Earth. Yeah. So this is a huge, potentially world-changing source of lithium, and lithium used for batteries and things like that. So this is a big deal. Issues with this situation is that this area where the mining is going to be happening is a sacred area, and it's projected to, by some, to impact local plants and animals negatively by dropping the water levels. There's ongoing litigation by the Rhino Sparks Indian Colony, the people of Red Mountain, and members of the Fort McDermott tribe. A big part of this is that the area which is going to be mined on is the site of a massacre that happened where Paiutes were killed, and in really brutal way, and just massacred. So this is a sacred burial area, essentially, with a big history of death. The name for the area is Pihi Muha, which means rotten moon. So there's some ongoing litigation around this thing, and people who are arguing for it are saying that the benefit of having this giant lithium mine is that it's easier to control and understand the environmentally degrading impacts of this mining when you have it in your country than when it's overseas. Lithium mining overseas is notoriously brutal, with really awful labor practices, really poor impacts on the environment. So people who are proponents of doing this, even reluctant people, are saying that that there are benefits to having this. This is something that's being done around the world. And there was somebody who is also sort of saying that this would be not necessarily a hugely damaging mine. The way that the lithium from this will be extracted is in such a way that it will not be necessarily as destructive as some other forms of mining. So there's ongoing litigation around it, but if people are saying don't dig here, then you got to work that situation out. You can't just go for it. And that's part of the issue as well, is just that it was pretty much given a check mark. And if you are wanting to genuinely have sustainable systems and sustainable economies, you can't be treating other people who have a sacred connection to that land in a way that is unsustainable. So, as good as it may seem, there are some problems with it, and we'll see how that goes. But absolutely massive lithium mine that. So that's all of our news. News for the week is done, and our thing of the week, which will be the theme of our research as well, is the Beaver. And I should have plugged this earlier. And we'll find out, how did the beaver get his tail? I'll put that in the title because I forgot to say it at the start. So that's what we're going to find out at the end of this thing of the week section. We're going to talk initially about Castoroides, which is an extinct animal, which was the giant beaver. It was the largest rodent in North America, and it was 6 feet long, or about 2 meters long, and up to 200 pounds. It was between 200 and 270 pounds and weighed up to between 90 and 125 kilograms. It had 6-inch long, 15 centimeter long teeth, and it had a relatively small brain, and may not have had as complex of an impact as the regular beavers that we're used to. It would have spent a lot of time in the water. The structure of its head and chest makes people think that it would have been able to hold its breath underwater for a long time. And yes, there's no evidence that they built dams, so it seems almost like they could have been something like a bit like capybara, which you see in South America, which are pretty big rodents. These fellas, these giant beavers, why did they go away is our question. And that's a question that gets asked about a lot of these giant North American animals that went extinct coincidentally when humans came to North America. But as tempting as it is to just say that humans would have wiped them out, they overlapped in existence with humans for 1,000 years. So they were present for 1,000 years while humans were there. So humans definitely didn't wipe them out right away. And the explanation for a lot of why these animals went extinct, and especially beavers, because they're very dependent on water sources, especially these fellows, because they need those water sources and things like that. And when you have these changing environment over time of the glacial expansion and retraction, you have drier climates switching to wetter climates. And sometimes when those climates are drier, that can knock down a species to such a level that even when it does get warmer and wetter, the damage is already done. That could be done genetically, things like that. If enough are getting killed that they're not really able to have robust genetics, so they're just not really surviving as well. Plus the impact of predation by humans can lead to these different populations getting wiped out. So that's generally kind of the explanation that people give for a lot of these sort of things happening. And there's no evidence yet of giant beavers being eaten. So there's no of the fossil evidence of giant beavers. There's no cuts or marks or things like that on the bones that would imply that humans were eating them. So we don't really know why they got wiped out. They are in some local histories of North American tribes, and it's unknown if the giant beavers in these stories are directly related to giant beavers or if it's talking about something else. Okay, so our thing of the week generally is beavers. Our thing of the week was the giant beaver. And now our research this week is looking at the impact of beavers on landscapes. There's research going on between NASA and researchers on the ground. And what NASA is helping out with is helping to look at the environment from the skies to get a better idea of how beavers are impacting landscapes in Idaho, which is in North America. What beavers do, they're little engineer guys, and they build dams, and the impact of this dam is that it backs up water, as dams do, and it slows the movement of water through the environment. So there's a level of groundwater that will be in the environment that flows downstream either through groundwater or via streams. And when you slow the movement of that water, that means water is going to be draining out of the environment at a slower rate, which means there's going to be more water available for plants and things like that, because we think of the roots of trees and things are going down into the groundwater. And if you have a dam, that's going to keep that groundwater level higher for longer. So this research is basically going to be looking at satellite imagery to see the rate at which reintroduction of beavers improves habitat. This is some pretty cool research to be doing because there's not too much research on the impacts of beavers, but they are known, and how quickly they can transform the environment, but they're known to increase plant biodiversity. And this imagery will help inform where to reintroduce beavers and what sort of areas. This is a complex thing to do because you will work with landholders and things like that. But this research actually pointed out that in many cases, the ranchers were a bit more on board with reintroduction of beavers because it is generally better for the wider environment. You're going to have more for your animals to eat if the ecosystem is more moist. This is going to be beneficial. If it's wetter, you're going to have less fire going through and things like that. And it's just going to be all around more beneficial. So a lot of landholders pretty on board. People who are less on board have, at least in terms of beaver introductions, have typically been folks that are sometimes in city areas that like a particular manicured environment. And if you've got a beaver around, they're going to make a dam and they're going to chop down your trees and make stuff. So a little counterintuitive sometimes there. But beavers are coming back. They're being reintroduced in the UK. Their populations are growing in the US as well. And they're being acknowledged as these important impact factors on the landscape. And not only are they keeping the water, the landscape wetter, they're also introducing more interconnections in between streams. And when you have more connections in between streams, you're going to have less likely of a situation where flooding is blowing things out and stuff like that. So having these little critters in the landscape is really beneficial for plants and animals and other things. And it's exciting to see this going on. So this is ongoing research to see how quickly these impacts happen. So it's not no results from this yet, but we'll keep an eye on that developing story to see just how quickly they can impact the landscape. Okay. Now we're gonna wrap up the show talking about, or reading a story about how the beaver got his tail. And this is in Ojibwe history. Once upon a time, there was a beaver that loved to brag about his tail. One day, while taking a walk, the beaver stopped to talk to a bird. The beaver said to the bird, "Don't you love my fluffy tail?" "Why, yes I do, little beaver," said the bird. "Don't you wish your feathers were as fluffy as my tail? Don't you wish your feathers were as strong as my tail? Don't you wish your feathers were just as beautiful as my tail?" the beaver asked. "Why do you think so much of your tail, little beaver?" asked the bird. This made the beaver mad, and he walked away. After walking for a while, he stopped for a drink by the river and saw a muskrat. He walked to the muskrat and said, "Hello, little muskrat. What do you think about my tail?" "Well, it's very beautiful and big and fluffy," answered the muskrat. "Is it also a strong tail?" "Why, yes, it is," the beaver answered. "Do you wish you had a tail like mine?" "I didn't say I wanted a tail like yours. I just asked if it was strong," the muskrat said with a disgusted voice. The beaver quickly turned and began walking back to his home. He was angry because he felt that the animals were being rude to him. He was very upset and decided to take out his anger by cutting down trees, as we all do. After cutting down a couple of trees, he came to a very large one. He knew that it would be a great challenge for him, so he went to it. But as he was cutting, he kept thinking about his tail. He didn't notice that he was cutting at a bad angle. Before he knew what was happening, the tree began to fall towards him. He jumped to get out of the way, but he didn't jump fast enough. The huge tree fell on his beautiful tail. He tugged and pulled and finally dug away the earth to free himself. When he finally pulled his tail from under the tree, he saw that it was flat. The beaver was very sad and started to cry. As he was crying, he heard a voice. It was the Creator. "Why are you crying?" said the Creator. "A tree has crushed my beautiful tail," the beaver cried. "Now no one will like me." The Creator told him that a beaver is not liked for his tail, but for his kindness and wisdom. He also told him how to use his flat tail. "Now your tail will help you swim rapidly," the Creator said. "And when you want to signal a message to a friend, all you have to do is slap your tail in the water." Hearing this made the beaver happy again. When the animals saw his flattened tail, they were shocked. But the beaver said, "It is better this way." From that day on, the beaver never bragged about his tail, and all the animals liked him. That's how the beaver got his tail. So there you have it. That's an Ojibwe history of how the beaver got his tail. So, yeah, what kind of what's your tail? And maybe get time to think about what our tails are. And yeah, I like that message of the reason that other creatures liked the beaver was because of the wisdom and kindness, not because of how cool our tails are. Although I'd be pretty stoked if I had a beaver tail. That'd be cool. But like you could do some cool work with that. I'd love to have a tail like a monkey tail where you could hang with it, like you could grab things. That would be awesome. So if you do find yourself having a monkey tail, be sure to enjoy it and no need to brag about it. People know you've got a cool tail, you know. Anywho, that's it for this week. I hope you're having a good week, and we'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.